Your Excellency, Mohamed Jules Yao, Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, distinguished heads of state and government, distinguished ministers, distinguished representatives of observers in titles of United Nations systems and other accredited intergovernmental organizations, representatives of civil society. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the first multi-stakeholder roundtable of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development on the theme Mobilizing and Aligning Domestic Public Resources. Let me take this opportunity to cordially welcome all of you to this multi-stakeholder roundtable. I am honored to serve as your co-chair together with His Excellency Mohamed Jules Yao, Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. As we start our deliberations on the 6th multi-stakeholder roundtables over the next 4 days, and before proceeding to the first roundtable, we shall first hear opening remarks by the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. I now invite the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Her Excellency Amina Mohamed, to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Excellencies, our Vice President of Sierra Leone, Excellency the President of Estonia, Excellencies, dear friends. One overarching message that has come out strongly from this morning's opening segment has been sustainable development has slowed and the assumption of future progress can no longer be assured. Countries across the globe are struggling to fulfill their development aspirations, exacerbated by an increasingly challenging global environment. As many speakers have stressed, to overcome this crisis, we need large-scale investments in sustainable development. That must be combined with the reset of systems and governance that puts countries in the driving seat to implement their national plans. Building on the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Seville commitment sets out a renewed impetus for a financing framework to deliver on the SDGs. The multi-stakeholder roundtables, starting this afternoon, are an opportunity for leaders, ministers and other stakeholders to propose how they plan to implement the Sevilla outcome across 6 priority areas. Excellencies, first we must explore how to strengthen the mobilization of domestic resources. This means all countries raising revenue ratios at least 15%, fighting illicit flows, and better aligning fiscal systems with sustainable development. This will require domestic action combined with international support, and I'm excited to hear your perspectives in the upcoming session this afternoon. Second, we must consider how we can fully tap the potential of the private sector investment and innovation for sustainable development. The Sevilla commitment puts the focus of private capital mobilization on both quantity and quality. I look forward to hearing how public and private actors intend to work together to mobilize private investment at a scale and to achieve the greatest impact. Third, amid our falling aid budgets, we need to work towards a revitalized and a reformed development cooperation architecture. An architecture that facilitates a shift from development assistance to investing in development, that counters growing fragmentation, and that incorporates all actors while placing developing countries at the center. And fourth, the global trading system under threat, we must send a strong signal that supports the role of trade as an engine for development. The Sevilla commitment puts forward actions to leverage trade's role, particularly for the most vulnerable countries, and including in strategic markets such as the critical minerals. Fifth, the Sevilla commitment provides an ambitious set of actions to remake the debt architecture. As one of the most critical deliverables of this conference, we look forward to hearing how stakeholders will urgently take forward these actions as a priority. It is imperative that we take steps to ease the burden of debt service on struggling economies, that we expedite the restructuring process when debt crises occur, and that we prevent crises from unfolding in the first place. Last but not least, we must explore the reform of the international financial architecture. We need an architecture that is both just, effective, and inclusive, in which the voices of all countries are represented. We welcome the agreement to triple the MDB lending as a first step, but we do need to see the capitalization of our banks. The Seville commitment builds on the Pact for the Future, agreed by the heads of state and the UN General Assembly last September, and it does make strides towards a more equal and just system for all countries. Excellencies, we appreciate you for coming to share your perspectives on transforming these ambitious commitments into reality, including within your countries, and taking up the actions that have been announced at the Seville Platform for Action. I look forward to the discussions that follow. I thank you.
I thank the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. We shall now proceed with the first multi-stakeholder roundtable. The summary of our discussions here today will be presented to the closing plenary meeting of a conference in the afternoon on Thursday, July 3rd. Before we proceed further, I would like to make some introductory remarks about the theme of our discussion today. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, in a rapidly evolving, globalized and increasingly digitalized economy, we all need to mobilize additional domestic public resources and ensure the efficient use for sustainable development. Estonia, with its transformative developmental trajectory, offers a valuable example of how strategic governance, digitalization, and innovation can achieve that. Debt and debt sustainability form the foundation of financial stability. Estonia has maintained one of the lowest public debt to GDP ratios in the EU, prioritizing fiscal discipline and prudent borrowing. This approach has preserved macroeconomic stability, enhanced investor confidence, and created fiscal space for public investment. Through public-private partnership in designing Estonian e-governance solutions facilitated by an open regulatory environment, Estonia has become a hub for startups and international tech firms. In parallel, strengthening domestic public resources has been vital. Estonia has implemented efficient tax system and digital public services to minimize leakage and improve transparency. Around 98% of all tax declarations in Estonia are filed electronically. The submission of annual declarations can be done in minutes, and companies spend less time on tax compliance than in any other country in the OECD. Our experience proves that transparent and efficient tax administration encourages voluntary compliance and boosts tax morale and citizen trust that result in increased revenues and even lower collection costs. Innovation has made all that possible. Estonia is also an early adopter of an AI to accelerate our public services, including financial and tax services, to become even more data-based and efficient. AI literacy carries a great responsibility here. In Estonia, I have come out with an initiative called AI Leap that is dealing with the issue from educational angle. Our goal is not just to teach how AI works, but to empower people to shape how it's used. I personally believe that AI literacy should become a core part of lifelong learning. Of course, Achieving a digital tax administration system needs meaningful connectivity, a society with digital and AI skills, and trust, relevant tax policies, data protection, and governance system. Here, international development cooperation steps in. Estonia, as others, is actively contributing to helping partner countries worldwide to adopt digitalized systems by sharing our digital governance expertise. By sharing our experience through global partnerships, we believe we can help partner countries to chart their own development paths, catering for their context to move towards building resilient, inclusive, and forward-looking societies. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a discussion that offers interesting challenges and solutions. And now, I hand over the floor to my fellow co-chair, Mohamed Chulder Chello, Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, distinguished co-chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my deep appreciation for the opportunity to co-chair this important roundtable alongside His Excellency Alar Karis, the President of Estonia. Estonia's global leadership in digital governance and innovation offers a compelling model for transforming public service delivery and domestic resource systems. One that we in Sierra Leone will be pleased to learn from and adapt to our own national context. We gather here today in Sevilla at a moment of urgency, but also of resolve. For many developing countries, including my own, the steep decline in development assistance coupled with the volatility in commodity markets, debt distress, present a sobering reality. The hard truth is this: traditional sources of financing, such as official development assistance and foreign direct investment, have proven insufficient, uneven, and most times unreliable. With just 5 years remaining to achieve the 2030 agenda, we must mobilize our own domestic resources more effectively, more equitably, and more sustainably. This, Excellencies, is a wake-up call, a call for bold ideas and innovative actions. Let me just make 5 points. First, we must deepen regional trade and integration. In Africa, intercontinental trade remains well below its potential. The African Continental Free Trade Area offers a transformative pathway to expand domestic revenue bases, generate decent jobs, and unlock the full economic value of our market. In West Africa, Sierra Leone is working through ECOWAS and the Mano River Union to harmonize trade policies, remove non-tariff barriers, and foster regional value chains. Excellencies, as chairperson of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government, His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio of Sierra Leone has placed regional integration at the heart of the community's agenda, emphasizing trade facilitation, infrastructure connectivity, and microeconomic convergence as foundational pillars for West Africa's development. These efforts are essential for broadening our fiscal space, enhancing resilience, and anchoring domestic resource mobilization in inclusive, sustainable, and regionally economic structures. Second, we must invest in modern digital public finance systems. As recognized in both the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the Sevilla Compromiso, the outcome document of this conference, digitalization is a key to enhancing transparency, broadening the tax base, and improving revenue collection. In Sierra Leone, we have rolled out a national payment switch that enables instant interoperability between banks and mobile operators. Third, innovation must be matched by capacity and inclusion. That is why Sierra Leone has launched its National Financial Inclusion Strategy targeting women, youth, and underserved rural communities. Fourth, national development banks and public financial institutions must be leveraged as key instruments for SDG-aligned investment. Sierra Leone is revitalizing its National Development Bank to support long-term credit in strategic sectors such as agriculture, renewable energy, and housing. Fifth, none of these offered excellencies can succeed without transparency and sound public financial management. In Sierra Leone, we are automating financial systems, decentralizing budget oversight, and improving tax administration. These reforms, supported by partners such as the UN Joint SDG Fund and the World Bank, are helping to ensure that public resources are allocated where they must be, to schools, health centers, energy projects, and climate adaptation. Excellencies, we welcome the strong emphasis in the Sevilla Compromiso on domestic resource mobilization, digital financing, and capacity building. Sierra Leone is fully committed to its implementation, and we urge international financial institutions and partners to align their support with nationally defined priorities. We also call for greater access to concessional finance and technical assistance to accompany reform where ambition is high but capacity is limited. In parallel, we must confront the persistent challenge of illicit financial flows, which continue to drain critical resources from developing economies. Addressing tax evasion, aggressive tax avoidance, and harmful profit-shifting practices is fundamental to expanding our domestic fiscal space. This is why Sierra Leone applauds the African strong leadership in the call for a UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation, which will establish inclusive, equitable, and rule-based global norms to combat illicit flows and foster greater transparency. The convention will help level the playing field for developing countries, ensuring that domestic revenue mobilization efforts are not undermined by transboundary leakages. Distinguished Excellencies, accordingly, let us not allow this conference to become another moment of diagnosis. Let it be remembered as a moment of determination, a turning point where we shift the conversation from dependence to dignity, from fragmentation to alignment, and from pledges to performance. Sierra Leone stands ready. We will do our part. We call on our partners to match our commitment. Together, let us make domestic resource mobilization the cornerstone of a just, inclusive, and sustainable global development architecture. I thank you.
I thank my fellow co-chair for these remarks. And now, I have the honor to invite His Excellency Denis Shmyhal, Prime Minister of Ukraine, our keynote speaker, to address the round table.
Distinguished co-chairs, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Ukraine is facing the most difficult test since the restoration of our independence. Russia's full-scale aggression is an attempt to destroy the Ukrainian state, and it is also a challenge to the entire international community. So first of all, I want to thank all the countries, financial institutions, and international partners who have stood with Ukraine over the past 3 years. Thank you. Because of your support, our government has been able to maintain social safety nets, fund education and health care, support displaced people, and restore critical infrastructure damaged by Russia's attack. I want to draw special attention to the burden of sovereign debt. Many countries today are struggling under unsustainable debt levels made worse by the pandemic, economic crises, and conflicts. Ukraine knows this not in theory, but through painful experience. The war has become a direct cause of a sharp increase in our public debt. We were forced to borrow on an extraordinary scale just to protect lives of our people and meet basic needs under the fire of aggression. For example, Ukraine's debt to GDP ratio jumped from less than 50% to nearly 90% in just 2 years of war. This is neither sustainable nor fair. Ukraine is defending its people, its territory, the borders of Europe, and the principles of the UN Charter. But the cost is economic exhaustion, and we are not alone in this. As we look ahead to 2026, military risks remain high and uncertainty is growing. To address this, Ukraine needs new and more flexible approaches to financial support. According to the World Bank, the UN, and the European Commission, Ukraine's recovery needs over the next years already exceed $500 billion. We believe that creating a mechanism for the full confiscation of Russian assets is the most just and effective way to provide financial support for Ukraine. The crime of aggression must have a financial response, a fair redirection of the entire value of immobilized Russian assets towards the reconstruction of our country. Of course, even these funds will not fully cover the damage caused by the war. That is why we propose an additional source of funding for recovery, the introduction of a special international levy on Russian exports. This could take the form of an additional tax or tariff on the import of Russian goods, such as oil and other key resources. The revenue would be directed to Ukraine's reconstruction fund, international fund. It's only fair that Russia pays for the destruction it has caused. Dear friends, dear colleagues, despite the war, Ukraine continues to move towards the path of reform and modernization. But real progress and breakthrough will only be possible once the war ends. We need peace. Yet Russia is doing everything it can to sabotage both peace negotiations and a ceasefire. That is why we also call for stronger pressure on Russia that can help bring a just and lasting peace closer. First of all, we call for stronger sanctions against Russia energy and banking sectors. We have evidence that Russia continues to supply oil to North Korea in exchange for weapons. It is a direct violation of UN Charter, of UN sanctions. That is why we ask to support Ukraine's initiative to add Russia to the FATF list of high-risk jurisdictions at the upcoming FATF plenary in October. Dear colleagues, partners, friends, let me once again thank all of you who stand today in support of international law, all of you who stand for peace, and all of you who stand with Ukraine. I am confident that together we will find the way that leads us to sustainable peace and prosperity for our nations. We believe that in the darkest times, solidarity is the light that keeps the world on the right path. So thank you so much for your solidarity. Thank you so much for your attention, for this privilege to be here with you. Thank you. Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of Ukraine. And now, have the honor to invite His Excellency Daniel Noboa Azin, President of the Republic of Ecuador, to a special address to the round table. Please.
Distinguished heads of state, panelists, Ecuador reaffirms its commitment to strengthen financing for development, which is essential for achieving the SDGs. But today, we are also going to talk about resources and how we can mobilize resources. What are the most important resources? Why they are the most important resources? And what is truly sustainable or unsustainable? The hardest thing to achieve is ensuring sustainability with human resources. How can we coordinate, mobilize, convince, and drive forward a group of people in order to follow a plan, to have the same purpose, to have the same idea of growth and development? Today, Ecuador is changing. And this is largely because we have been able to mobilize these human resources to ensure that an entire country aligns towards a better future, towards building a better country. The era of ideologies is over. Young people today are seeking a clear, direct and pragmatic way of moving forward, seeking jobs, seeking employment, and a sense of patriotism, and they're looking for ways of working with no strings attached, but driving towards the common good, the development of their local areas, their provinces, their country. We have worked together with young people so that we also have diverse human resources. This diversity helps us achieve our goals through a plan and through different angles to achieve what we set out. We have a gender equal cabinet. We also have the youngest cabinet in the history of Ecuador. It is the most diverse in terms of the numbers of the provinces that are represented. And this is how we can sustain what is truly sustainable. Sustainable progress, respect is sustainable, tolerance is sustainable, but more than anything else, hope. Hope is what sustains us, driving us all towards the same North Star. And this is what is going to allow us to build a better future with a political and social order that is fair. Thank you.
Thank you, President of the Republic of Ecuador. And now I'm pleased to welcome distinguished presenters for the panel discussion. And I also welcome Mr. Gilbert Houngbo, Director-General of the International Labour Organization, who will moderate the deliberations. I now turn the meeting over to the moderator, and I look forward to an open, constructive and productive exchange of views. Please.
Thank you so much, co-chairs, excellencies. I'm so privileged to be given the opportunity to moderate the panel discussion, particularly in a context as we have been hearing since this morning of domestic public resources, which are the backbone of any credible development strategy. They are how we translate ambition into action, how we invest in people in people's security and dignity. We have to accept and recognize that there has been progress. Today, over half of the world population is covered, but at least one social protection benefit. Yet, in the 20 most climate vulnerable countries, fewer than 1 in 10 people is covered by any kind of social protection. And these countries have the narrowest fiscal margins and the heaviest debt burdens. So we remain far from universality. Beyond fiscal discipline, we need structural solution. We need to treat social protection as a foundational investment on par with infrastructure, health, and education. So at the heart of today's conversation is the need to build fair, effective system of taxation and social spending that reflect the diversity of employment structure, especially in countries with large informal economies. Decent work is not only a development objective, it's also the engine of sustainable financing. This is why macroeconomic frameworks must be explicitly employment-centered, even integrating employment impact assessment into public investment decision. The Compromiso de Sevilla reaffirms the importance of multilateralism and a sustaining international framework, and it gives us a very clear, pragmatic benchmark in extending social protection coverage by at least 2 percentage points per year. The real test now lies in implementation with national ownership, institutional capacity, and the international solidarity. And the ILO, as a custodian of the SDG 1.3.1 on the proportion of the population covered by social protection, we will launch a global platform to support governments in designing and tracking policies that make these commitments real. We will work together with all the stakeholders in this regard. So I would like to invite our panelists, the panel members, to help us frame this discussion today. And let me put 3 questions out there. First, what are the reforms and the investment that are most urgent? Second, how can we strengthen tax cooperation and transparency? And third, how do we unleash the full potential of public development banks? Just before inviting the panelists, I have the duty to remind all of us that we really need to stick to time, because we have a very heavy level of member states that have subscribed to be taking the floor later in this session. So please do not forget, push me to interrupt your interventions. So be mindful of the time. If I have to, well, I have to. So with this, let me start with His Excellency, the Spain Minister of Foreign Affairs, EU and Cooperation, Minister José Manuel Álvarez Bueno. Excellency, you have the floor, please.
Excellencias.
Excellencies, delegates, the existence of more efficient and fair taxation systems is necessary to build the fiscal space that will allow countries to invest in their own sustainable development. We are working to achieve taxation systems that are simpler and more progressive and more effective, that are adapted to each national context and to the reality of a globalized economy marked by high mobility of capital and specifically of high wealth. We should focus specifically on supporting the systems in developing countries, and we are also promoting urgent options for international cooperation to achieve minimum taxation on large fortunes and to optimize the green economy. The digitalization of the economy and international fiscal norms for tech companies is also at the core of our discussions. Improving integrity and transparency in taxation is one of the pending issues, and we are strengthening current efforts to avoid and combat illicit financial flows. Our goal must be to increase the resources available to finance sustainable development, and the key to doing this is mobilizing and optimizing domestic resources. International fiscal cooperation and the promotion of redistributive policies such as investment in health, in education and universal social protections, these are just some examples. This is why Spain is committed to active and constructive participation as part of the UN framework on international tax cooperation, taking into account other areas such as the OECD and the G20. And this is why, during the negotiations ahead of Seville, we opted for transparency, building national registers, and guaranteeing that this information is shared with all of the competent authorities and also third countries, and we are moving towards a global register. We must also strengthen country-to-country reporting of multinationals and their public transparency by building a central repository and also extending reporting obligations to ultra-rich individuals and foundations. International cooperation has been driving programs in Latin America and the Caribbean in this area. And recently, through our democracy program, we are promoting dialogue in relation to reform of tax systems. It is only if we are able to reduce the economic and social gaps globally and at a state level and also at a local level, and only if we strengthen social cohesion by recognizing and acknowledging diversity, this is the only way that we can advance with the ideas of justice to leave no citizen behind.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. And also thank you to have really sent the discipline in terms of time management, 3 minutes, 12 seconds. So I'm sure Her Excellency Ms. Rim Alabani Radovan, Federal Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development from Germany, will follow suit. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Countries around the world are struggling to guarantee public investment for the well-being of their people and of future generations. Domestic revenue mobilization is key here. It reduces inequalities and finances sustainable development. Effective and a progressive tax system are needed around the world. Governments need sufficient fiscal space to fight poverty and to invest in public goods like health, education, and climate protection. Germany supports partner countries in mobilizing additional tax revenues and doing so in a socially just manner. Currently, we are supporting over 30 partner countries in this important area. Germany has also been a driving force behind international initiatives such as the Addis Tax Initiative, or ATI. As a platform that unites various stakeholders behind a common agenda, the ATI plays a key role in international tax cooperation. The ATI shows that strengthening tax policies and tax administrations is one of the most cost-effective investments in development cooperation. Every dollar invested in this way brings at least 4 times the amount in new domestic funds. This is especially important in times when ODA budgets are being cut in many countries. So the ATI Civil Declaration on Domestic Revenue Mobilization comes just at the right time. It renews and strengthens our joint commitment to step up our support for domestic revenue mobilization. I call upon all stakeholders to join us and contribute to these collective efforts. I particularly welcome the fact that the ATI Civil Declaration strengthened international tax cooperation and the taxation of the super-rich. Together, we must ensure that everybody, including multinational corporations and the super-rich, pay their fair share in taxes. To fight tax evasion and illicit financial flows, we must go beyond national jurisdiction. We must advance effective international tax cooperation in existing forums such as the OECD. And we must all contribute to the success of the UN Tax Framework Convention. All of these aspects are addressed in the Compromiso de Sevilla, an agreement that is about much more than a compromise, an agreement that underscores our commitment to international cooperation, solidarity and justice, and that will drive multilateral cooperation forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister from Germany. L'honneur me choisit maintenant de...
It is now my honor to give the floor to Mr. Chef Diba, Minister of Finance and Budget of the Republic of Senegal. Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. In the light of time constraints, we will focus only on what is most relevant in the light of this meeting, specifically reduction in external financing. There's an explosion in social and climate-related needs, unsustainable debt, and the informal sector and tax exemptions. I will address the various questions that you will put to me, and I would like to state that we intend to do the following. For enhancement of countering tax evasion and illicit financial flows, to reduce the tax fraud, we have established a mechanism to combat base erosion and its 2 variants, combating benefit shifting with increased documentation in terms of financial flows, combating financial flows to privilege the areas of privileged tax situations. For this, we have established an update mechanism with the documentation for establishments of societal groups. We have also established a mechanism to ensure verification, audit, and drawing on intelligence to address heightened risks such as hydrocarbons, mines, and the digital economy. We also are among those bodies that have embraced the OECD and G20 frameworks, and we have a more effective moderation of administrative tax systems to combat tax evasion, and the establishment of stable artificial bodies. We note that the blocking of that there have been more than 130 bodies have adopted a mechanism to ensure that there's a minimum tax level that is paid by major multinational businesses to ensure that there is a fair distribution to combat illicit financial flows. We would note that we have updated our anti-money laundering law in February 2024, and we the GAFI has noted this as well. In order to improve the implementation of the national strategy to combat illicit financial flows, we have established a national coordination committee which is permanently monitoring implementation of due diligence procedures by all stakeholders, and this is part of a proactive cooperation. At the administrative level, we have We intend to work to update and digitize our methods, and we have a single tax identifier. We are currently working to ensure interconnection and interoperability of various information systems. We are also reorganizing fiscal administration structures to ensure proactive management of tax payments on the basis of category of taxation. Our target in terms of taxation, 25% by 2029, 20 to 22%. We wish to recall that tax pressure rate is approximately 16% in developing countries, and we are seeking to address these issues. To support the UN Framework Convention on International Trade, vis-a-vis what was mentioned by the moderator, I wish to recall the main difference between the UN tax modes and those of the OECD. This is on the basis of the distribution of taxation rights, particularly for developing countries. The UN model fosters a greater taxation by source countries, whereas the OECD emphasizes countries of residence of the taxpayer. The UN model, thereby, is more favorable to countries such as Senegal in the light of the challenges we have in terms of mining. So logically, we support the UN Framework Convention on International Trade, which could help us to break the impasse in terms of the anti-tax evasion issue to ensure a minimum level of taxes paid by multilateral businesses on the basis of revenue generated in each country where they operate. Thank you.
Monsieur le ministre Diba, je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Diba, Minister Diba.
The floor to Mr. Nigel Clark, the Deputy Managing Director for the IMF. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. It's an honor to participate in this panel today on behalf of the IMF. As you all know, I joined the IMF last year, and before that I served as Minister of Finance in Jamaica. And this was during some of the most turbulent years in recent memory, marked by elevated uncertainty, including the COVID-19 pandemic and extreme weather events. And I can tell you that this has profoundly shaped my view on the role of revenue capacity as the crucial financial enabler of state capacity. Development is not funded by hope. It is funded by deliberate, disciplined, and equitable mobilization of resources. This is the lesson that I carry with me from my time as a policymaker and finance minister. And it's a lesson I believe holds true for all nations. Sound public finances are essential to safeguard macroeconomic stability and lay the foundations for sustained growth. But across much of the world, increases in tax capacity have slowed. Productive expenditure is being crowded out by rising debt service, and spending pressures are intensifying. The key to the progress lies in country-led reform agendas that focus on building trust, taxing fairly, and spending wisely. Revenue capacity is not just about revenues. It's about the state's capacity to invest in infrastructure, respond to crises, and deliver services for people, from roads and electricity to sanitation and health, and to education and security. And according to our latest research, there is a tipping point of tax to GDP that, once crossed, supports higher sustained economic growth and resilience. The right level of revenue mobilization and taxation will depend on each country's economic and social circumstances. But our research shows and suggests that targeting at least 11 to 15% of GDP is best. Below that, it is very, very difficult for governments to manage their economies and provide adequate public services. Unfortunately, however, many countries are well below this level. And as countries progress past this tipping point, high economic growth is accompanied by better financial management, more government effectiveness, and stronger legal institutions. This creates fertile ground for the private sector to help boost growth and job creation. But it sounds easy and it sounds great to say it on paper, but we know that it is far from easy. In much of the developing world, progress on improving revenue levels has stalled, and deep political resistance to tax increases remains. And yet, countries like Cambodia, Rwanda, and I'm proud to say Jamaica have made great progress, and there is potential for others to follow. Our research shows that low-income countries could gain as much as 7% of GDP in tax revenue over the medium to long term by raising their tax efforts to match the best-performing developing countries. If they implement strong public financial management systems, they can ensure that those revenues are used efficiently. This is critical. To be successful, spending and revenue reforms must be part of a coherent country program, and that can often benefit from international support. That is why we created the Global Public Finance Partnership. Through this, we provide flexible and holistic capacity development support to our members, tailored to each country and designed to equip them with the tools and expertise they need to succeed. We will continue to deliver this essential capacity development in close partnership with the international community. What is the bottom line? Going back to the beginning, revenue capacity is the ultimate foundation of national resilience. Without it, there's no fiscal space. Without fiscal space, there's no sustainable development. It's not just about revenue, but it's about how revenue is collected. It's about trust, about fairness, and long-term, stable, and enduring growth. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
I thank the Deputy Managing Director Clark from the IMF. Excellency, we also have put together two discussants. I'm going to ask them after listening to the panelists from the intervention made by the Spain Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Germany Minister for Economic Cooperation, listen to the Minister of Finance from Senegal, and the Deputy Managing Director. Also, having listened to the special intervention by President Karis from Estonia, the Vice President Jallo from Sierra Leone, the intervention by the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed, and we also have the Prime Minister from Ukraine, as well as the President of Ecuador. What are their reflections? So we have two discussants that I'm going to call on to hear from them. First of all, if I may ask Ms. Calvino, if you may really wish to share your views at this stage. Ms. Calvino, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much for this very impressive panel, and I'd like just to elaborate on 2 points that have been raised by a number of participants. Global partnerships and the role of multilateral development banks, and secondly, artificial intelligence. So coming to the role of multilateral development banks, and I'm speaking on behalf of the European Investment Bank, that, as you know, is probably the largest multilateral development institution in the world, with a 600 billion balance sheet. We operate throughout the whole world, although 90% of financing is within the European Union. And we are a proud member of the Multilateral Development Bank family. Now, when I was preparing for this intervention, I was a bit surprised to read that there are 530 public development banks in the world. And actually, I think we heard here in the panel that there is a reinforcement of the national promotional banks. So this is a very strong network that is mobilizing $23 trillion in assets, and that should really play a very important role, I think, in mobilizing public and private finance and supporting this prosperity, that shared prosperity that we're all working for. So I think that the main multilateral development banks, we're making strong efforts to work better as a system. In the course of this week in Sevilla, the European Investment Bank is signing 2 memoranda of understanding with 2 development banks active in Latin America, the Inter-American Development Bank and CAF. We're also working very closely with the Asian Development Bank and the other development banks. So I was thinking that there is merit, I think, in trying to see how we can leverage each other's expertise, how can we leverage our financing capacity so that we can maximize impact on the ground. And national coordination, national platforms, this idea of having a transparent platform with all relevant information would really help, I think, the Multilateral Development Bank family to coordinate their actions and be as efficient, as fast as possible. A plea that we keep hearing from countries around the world. And the second point is on artificial intelligence. You were talking about the importance, President Karins, on the importance of AI literacy and the potential of AI in improving the functioning of public administration. I think also artificial intelligence is a tool that should help fight tax evasion, profit shifting, and all these other weaknesses of the international system that we were referring to. But there is a need also to build a global governance of artificial intelligence. And I'd like to call on the United Nations to follow up on the very interesting report that was presented last September by the expert group that was convened to reflect on this global architecture, global governance for artificial intelligence, to make sure that these new technologies are really contributing to a stronger world, stronger multilateral system, better societies, and improving the future of humankind, to speak in a dramatic but I think quite proportionate sense to this technology that is already changing our lives and will even change it more in all different aspects in the coming years. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Ms. Nadia Calvino, the President of the European Investment Bank. I would now like to call on Mr. Yingmin Yang, the Vice President of the Asia Development Bank, to share his views, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. After listening to the distinguished speakers, I have accumulated one overarching message and 3 takeaways. Domestic resource mobilization is essential for countries to be more self-reliant and resilient. This is the overarching message I have learned. And regarding the 3 takeaways, first, it is essential to provide targeted support to enhance tax capacity where it matters most. And second, it is critical to promote international tax cooperation to tackle cross-border challenges. Third, it is crucial to increase timely multilateral support to help countries navigate the challenges and opportunities from increasingly digitalized economy. And I believe, based on our experiences, MDB together can do a lot to help to respond to those 3 expectations. Taking ADB as an example, as early as in 2021, we established the Asia-Pacific Tax Hub as an open and inclusive platform to promote strategic policy dialogue, knowledge sharing, and domestic coordination, driving structural and impactful tax reforms across Asia and the Pacific. And we also provide important technical assistance to support developing countries to tackle cross-border tax evasion and avoidance by implementing harmonized international tax standards. And with the increasing demand for ADB to help to deal with the challenges and the opportunities from the increasingly digitalized economy, Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia and the Pacific have been used to meet those demands significantly. For example, ADB is helping Southeast Asian countries strengthen domestic resource mobilization by implementing international tax transparency and BEPS standards. This includes action plan aligned with the OECD G20 inclusive framework and the two-pillar solution on taxing the digital economy. To conclude, I think looking to the future, MDB, including ADB, can do more to help with domestic resource mobilization efforts in order to help client countries to build the fiscal foundation for sustainable development. Thank you.
Let me once again thank Ms. Nadia Calvino, the President of European Investment Bank, and Mr. Yang, the Vice President from Asia Development Bank, as discussant. At this stage, we're going to go back to the co-chair, namely Vice President Anjalo from Sierra Leone, for the intervention from the floor. I'm going to ask the panelists to please be with us at the end of the intervention from the floor. We will ask you to share your final remark after listening to the member state. Vice President, may I please give you the floor back?
Thank you very much, our moderator, for expertly guiding the discussions. And I also want to thank our distinguished panelists, for their excellent contribution, and more importantly, thank the discussant also for their insight. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we will now listen to interventions from participants in the roundtable. All participants are expected to speak from their respective seats. We have a large number of speakers wishing to make statements in the roundtable, and as you know, we have just 3 hours for our deliberations. So in order to maximize the time available to us and allow as many participants as possible to take the floor, I will want to urge all speakers to kindly observe the time limit of 3 minutes for their interventions. To assist distinguished speakers, a timer has been installed. So when the clock signifies that the 3 minutes have been exhausted, speakers are kindly requested to conclude their statement in accordance with the agreed modalities. The microphone, please note that the microphone will be deactivated 30 seconds after the allotted time has elapsed. In adhering to the time limit of 3 minutes, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statement at a normal speed so that interpretations will be done accordingly. I now open the floor for intervention. In this regard, you are encouraged to limit your intervention, like I said earlier, to 3 minutes. Excellencies, I now give the floor to His Excellency Jose Maria Pereira Neves, President of the Republic of Cape Verde. You can speak from your seat, Your Excellency. Thank you. You have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the effective, transparent, and strategically focused mobilization of domestic public resources is a paramount priority. This is necessary for the success of sustainable development programs as well as for the enhancement of the social contract linking the government, the state, with its citizens. The Sevilla commitment provides us with an ambitious and pragmatic framework for action. Cabo Verde has set out as among its priorities the enhancement of transparency and fiscal responsibility, as well as the promotion of more equitable and more progressive fiscal systems, as well as the inclusive broadening of the tax base and the leveraging of public development banks as tools for transformative financing. At the national level, we have initiated structural reforms. We are banking on digitalization of tax administration, the streamlining of procedures, and targeted support for micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. We are strengthening budgetary transparency as well as democratic and technical oversight mechanisms. And we are also seeking to align the tax policy with the principles of social equity, environmental sustainability, as well as gender equality. However, it behooves us to recognize that national efforts, rigorous as they may be, are not enough when it comes to offsetting the asymmetries and the weaknesses of an international fiscal architecture that remains marred by opacity, imbalances of negotiating power, and a dearth of meaningful cooperation. In this vein, we reiterate our firm support for the prompt conclusion of negotiations with a view to the adoption of the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. Only a genuinely inclusive global fiscal order can guarantee the equitable resources of redistribution of resources, which are presently slipping away due to tax evasion practices and illicit flows. The era of vague promises is over. Financing for development begins at the national level, but this also requires a more equitable, a more coherent international system with solidarity at its heart. Cabo Verde reaffirms our full willingness and readiness to engage in an ambitious and accountable way in this shared endeavor and effort. Thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency. I will now give the floor to His Excellency Salumze Komasat, Deputy Prime Minister of the Laos People's Democratic Republic. You have the floor.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, distinguished panelists, and I thank that the discussions at these sessions has been very interesting, and I fully support the notion that domestic resource mobilization is a crucial component of sustainable development financing. LDCs in particular needs to mobilize additional resources to meet our national development priority and development goal, while enhancing countries' ownership as well as self-reliance. Let me also share with you that the Lao PDR has been working to accelerate domestic resource mobilization through reforms in public financial management, tax administrations, revenue collection, and overall fiscal management. These includes implementing digital solutions, strengthening institutional capacity, and fostering a more transparent and inclusive economic future. In addition, the Lao PDR has also explored other potential sources of revenue and remains committed to further reform program with an aim of raising tax revenue to 20% of our GDP by 2030. However, there are significant challenges that we face. These include limited resources to invest in technology and infrastructure, insufficient capacity to administer and enforce tax law, limited multilateral cooperation, and persistent issues in combating tax evasion, tax avoidance, and illicit financial flow. In this light, the FFD4 must adopt credible commitment and practical solutions to strengthen tax systems in LDCs. This requires a multifaceted approach, including increased financial and technical assistance, sustained capacity building, and inclusive policy dialogue. The FFD4 should also support the LDCs in identifying priority actions at both national and international levels. At the international levels, we call for deeper reflection on how official development assistance can be better aligned with domestic resources mobilization goals. Technical assistance and financing for capacity building must be tailored to national needs. Strengthened tax cooperation is also essential to effectively address tax evasions and illicit financial flows. At the national levels, key areas include improving transparency in tax and non-tax revenue collection, strengthening tax policies, administrations, formalizing the informal sector, and leveraging technology to enhance efficiencies and compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I will now give the floor to His Excellency Gordon, to His Excellency Asmund Grover Horkrost, Minister of International Development of Norway. You have the floor. It's not there. I will now give the floor to Her Excellency Vera Davis, Minister of Finance of the Republic of Angola. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a great honor for Angola to participate in this roundtable. The mobilization of domestic resources is of paramount importance for the sustainable development of our countries. As highlighted in the Seville commitment, public resources and fiscal policies are central to our collective efforts to transform our economies and integrate them into the global value chain. At the national level, Angola is undertaking structural reforms aligned with our National Development Plan 2023-2027, including the digitalization of tax administration and modernization of revenue collection system. The adoption of a new legal regime for public funds aimed at enhancing transparency and efficiency in budgetary management, and strengthening of public audit and oversight mechanisms to foster citizens' trust and investors' confidence. We also recognize the critical importance of accountability. Transparent reporting on revenue sources and expenditure allocation is essential to fostering a culture of tax compliance among enterprises and citizens. As such, we promote regular reporting on tax expenditure as part of our transparency agenda. Angola has also launched its first green and social bond. This pilot project in Namib province, an area severely affected by drought, raised approximately $64 million. The funds will be applied to rehabilitate 43 small dams, providing water for communities and livestock, reducing deforestation and other social programs. The mobilization of domestic public resources is not merely a technical goal, it is a concrete expression of sovereignty, intergenerational justice, and transformative ambition. Angola is fully committed to the implementation of the Seville commitment and to a global fiscal architecture that reflects the realities of developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I will now give the floor to His Excellency Wale Edun, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. Along with what we have heard today, we in Nigeria acknowledge the importance of domestic resource mobilization, and here I will include the private sector We're talking about mobilizing the savings of the country, including the private sector. This is the most reliable and sustainable source of development finance, particularly within the context of what we can all see, fragmented, siloed global economy, driven by capital flow shifts, demographic shifts, and political and ideological realignments. All of these have exposed sub-Saharan Africa in particular to significant challenges to meet urgent development needs. So for us, the need for the aligning of domestic public resources at scale to foster sustainable development is critical. Our approach in Nigeria to domestic public resource mobilization is grounded in a macroeconomic reform program over the last 2 years, which has eliminated 5% in wasteful subsidies, which has also meant stabilization of the economy, particularly inflation, the exchange rate, and increasing government revenue, and now pushing for growth. So against that backdrop, we do call for stronger international cooperation to combat illicit financial flows and to ensure global tax equity, noting that such flows undermine domestic resource efforts in developing countries. And we had heard earlier today that it costs $88 billion a year in flows out of the developing countries. We believe that we have made recent efforts in active participation in the OECD inclusive framework and on base erosion and profit sharing, strengthening the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. So we believe that sharing best practices and expertise, as well as relevant technical and capacity building where required, in mobilizing investments and resources to support the development agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I give the floor to His Excellency Hervé Houngbo, Minister of Finance and Budget, Central African Republic.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I am honoured and I have the pleasure of participating in this important roundtable on behalf of the Central African Republic. We are landlocked and we have structural difficulties, but we have placed the mobilization of public resources at the heart of our strategy to improve governance and transparency and digitization by strengthening capacity that is necessary for the implementation of reforms and to combat illicit financial flows and tax evasion. While this has allowed us to increase revenue by about 50% between 2021 and 2024, this has essentially gone to servicing debt, which has reached unsustainable levels and does not allow us to redeploy the entire program across the national territory. Having said this, the level of tax pressure of around 8% is the lowest in our economic area, and this shows that we can create wealth by establishing frameworks that allow us to develop secondary sectors, energy, connectivity, strong and reliable institutions, and on the other hand, accelerating implementation of reforms. However, it is also urgent that we diversify the sources of financing. This means climate financing, and for this we have set up a legal framework in accordance with Article 6 of the Paris Accord. The Central African Republic has 10% of the basin, the second green lung of the Earth, has allowed us to sequester a lot of carbon. Since 2024, we have used our first carbon credit from this carbon sequestration. We also need financing from the private sector. This is why we support the Sevilla commitment to double mobilization of domestic resources and also to strengthen governance and acceleration of digitization with a holistic approach so that we can address the energy challenges and connectivity challenges as well as those of human resources. We also need to have development banks mobilize massive credits at suitable conditions. We support the tripling of capacity of the MDBs and correcting the debt system so that we can ensure macroeconomic stability and find a little bit of fiscal flexibility. And this will help us achieve the 2030 agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now give the floor His Excellency Artjoms Uršulskis, Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Latvia.
Thank you very much, dear Co-Chair. As development aid continues to decline and the world remains off track in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, developing countries face a pressing challenge to expand fiscal space and also take greater ownership on their development trajectories. The path forward lies in sustainable and self-reliant financing. Domestic resource mobilization is central to this effort. It empowers countries to fund their own development priorities, with domestic revenues providing the most reliable and also enduring source of financing for public goods and services. Progressive domestic resource mobilization, in particular, is a powerful tool for long-term inclusive growth. It not only mobilizes resources, but also reduces inequality, advances shared prosperity, supports climate action, and accelerates progress towards the sustainable development goals. We welcome the outcome document's commitment to promoting progressive tax systems, ensuring that those with greater means, including high net worth individuals, contribute more is essential to protecting the most vulnerable and also essential to strengthen social cohesion. Well-designed progressive tax reforms can also incentivize labor force participation, especially among women, and support transition from informal to formal employment. This boosts productivity, reduces poverty, and also fosters inclusive economic transformation. We count on multilateral development banks to lead in supporting client countries with targeted structural reforms that strengthen progressive domestic resource mobilization. Latvia has consistently championed greater ambition from the World Bank in this area, an effort reflected in our growing contributions to each IDA replenishment and also our advocacy for strong policy commitments and measurable results on progressive domestic resource mobilization. Let me conclude by underscoring that strengthening progressive domestic resource mobilization is not just a fiscal necessity. It is a developmental imperative. It is foundational to reducing inequality, building climate resilience, and enabling sustainable, inclusive growth. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Jiří Kozák, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Czechia.
Thank you. Excellencies, I welcome the opportunity to engage in this important discussion on domestic resources mobilization, which is the cornerstone of sustainable progress. Without effective mobilization of domestic resources, no country can achieve long-term prosperity. Domestic resources mobilization is not only about collecting more taxes, it is about creating fair, efficient and transparent systems that build trust between citizens and their governments. It is about ensuring that resources are used for what matters most: education, healthcare, infrastructure, and resilience in the face of crises. In Czechia, we have seen that trust in public institutions requires transparency, accountability, and inclusion. Good governance is the link between resources and real impact. But public institutions cannot act alone. Real progress requires broad participation. Youth, local governments, civil society, and especially the private sector are all playing a crucial role. When aligned with public goals, private sector resources can have a multiplier effect. They unlock innovations and enable long-term investments. The introduction of international standards on financial transparency and the strengthening of institutions' oversight capacities will help to improve the management of public funds and reduce corruption risks. Czechia fully supports international efforts to strengthen domestic resources mobilization and participates constructively in the negotiations of the United Nations Framework Convention on international tax cooperation and its early protocols, which aim of achieving an effective outcome that can be supported by the broadest possible number of parties. Czechia also promotes coherence in the activities of various international fora on tax matters, such as those of the OECD and the United Nations Committee of Experts on International Cooperation in Tax Matters. In Czech development cooperation, building effective, accountable and inclusive institutions is one of our cross-cutting priorities. In partner countries, we support initiatives that help build transparent and efficient systems of public financial management. We believe that strong institutions must go hand in hand with better public services and show taxpayers that their contribution bring real benefits. Effective, transparent and accountable public finance systems are essential for mobilizing the resources needed to achieve the sustainable development goals. Strengthening public financial systems is not just a technical matter, it is a key to build trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the World Bank Group.
Efficient tax systems and robust local capital markets enable countries to invest in healthcare, education and essential infrastructure and empowers the private sector to create jobs. But today, 78% of low-income countries and 46% of low mix collect less than 15% of GDP in taxes. Narrow taxes bases, extensive exemptions and low-capacity tax administrations compound the challenge in many countries. On average, developing countries lose 3% of GDP from tax exemptions. Typically, they are regressive, thus not benefiting the poorest. Tax administrations also need significant improvements to close large tax gaps. Digitalization and new technologies like AI can be an ally in improving tax collection and uncovering evasion. At the same time, underdeveloped local capital markets limit financing options for private investors and expose economies to sudden outflows and exchange rate risks. Illicit financial flows also remain a barrier to development. Governments lose significant resources each year to tax evasion and inadequate public procurement practices. The World Bank is supporting countries to address this challenge in the following way. To boost revenue collection, we are working with countries to broaden their tax base by phasing out inefficient and costly tax exemptions. We are also helping modernizing tax administrations so countries can digitize their systems and harness artificial intelligence. To scale up domestic capital markets, we are also helping countries design policies, bolster local currency financing and bond markets, and develop domestic institutional investors, such as pension funds. In parallel, we are assisting countries in tackling illicit financial flows. We are focused on the following areas: linking people to their assets through digital identification to make it harder to hide illicit funds, build stronger systems, and recovering stolen assets. Let me conclude that To address the challenge, we need to work all together. Partnerships are very important, and the World Bank, with other partners and clients, will continue to work together to address this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Was already close. Okay. And now I give the floor His Excellency Asmund Krove Aukrust, Minister of International Development, Norway.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a great honor to be here in Sevilla and to celebrate the consensus reached on the Compromiso de Sevilla. This document is not only a triumph for multilateralism, but also reaffirms key principles regarding domestic public research and provides a clear path forward. From Norway, I dare to say that we know a thing or two about taxes. Our progressive tax system has served our people well and is the foundation of the Norwegian welfare state. On the flip side, there are challenges of tax evasion and avoidance. These are universal issues that lead to significant public revenue losses, distort competition among companies, and economic inequalities. While developing countries may bear the brunt of these consequences, no nation is immune. We are witnessing a major shift in international development cooperation. While Norway remains committed to maintain a high level of official development assistance at 1% of GNI, global ODA is declining. In this new reality, domestic resource mobilization is more crucial than ever before. In Addis Ababa in 2015, we pledged to support revenue administrations. Today, we have decided to raise our ambitions, collectively double our efforts, and expand our commitments to encompass a broader fiscal system that will not only increase revenues, but also deliver meaningful development outcomes. Norway is a founding member of the Addis Tax Initiative, and I am proud to say that we have fulfilled our 2015 commitments to more than double our contribution to tax-related development assistance. We are a leading country on the new Addis Tax Initiative declaration, the Sevilla Declaration on Domestic Resource Mobilization, which has now been accepted to the Sevilla Platform on Action. As a concrete follow-up from Sevilla, Norway pledged to continue scaling up our support for domestic resource mobilization. Inclusive and effective international tax cooperation is here a key, and we look forward also to discussing this both in the OECD and in the UN framework. As we redouble our efforts to mobilize resources, we will also ensure that existing funds are used efficiently and transparently. Preventing corruption is essential to build trust on the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now I give a floor to His Excellency Martin Francos Rodriguez, Vice Minister of Planning and Public Investment of the Ministry of Economic, Planning and Development of Dominican Republic.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Excellencies, friends, all, I bring greetings on behalf of the government of the Dominican Republic. Domestic public resources are the bedrock that underpin public interventions. They are essential to reducing structural vulnerabilities. The challenges associated with financing for development are becoming increasingly complex due to various external shocks to which we have been exposed, and this is especially the case in island nations such as ours with high exposure to climate-related risks. All of this, together with reduced fiscal space and inflexible budgets, makes it difficult to adequately address the multiple development priorities. The government of the Dominican Republic joins many countries present here in their efforts to strengthen mobilization of domestic public resources. And we have identified three major areas. Firstly, strengthening public finances and monitoring mechanisms based on national instruments that allow us to improve efficiency of spending and also to reduce tax evasion. Secondly, driving linkages between planning and budget so that we can ensure the greatest effectiveness in the deployment of resources. In this regard, advancing towards the implementation of results-oriented budgeting methods and using tools to make spending more efficient through results-based payment mechanisms is a necessary step. And thirdly, integrating financial resources from private sources and also from international cooperation into implementation of development priorities, mainly through national planning instruments and through public policy. It's also necessary to move towards the availability of timely and reliable data with thematic and financing indicators that allow us to take informed and evidence-based decisions to close gaps. All of this must be accompanied by the strengthening of institutional capacity and human capacity. We would like to emphasize the need to strengthen tax cooperation through bilateral and multilateral agreements regarding information exchange to ensure a fair and equitable tax burden for all. Finally, we reiterate our commitment to work hand in hand with the international community and the multilateral system to turn the Seville commitments into tangible actions that promote sustainable development in our countries. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. And now I give the floor to Her Excellency Sim Man, Senior Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Home Affairs of Singapore.
Thank you, co-chairs. To close the financing gap, robust and predictable domestic revenue streams must be the foundation of our efforts. Effective domestic resource mobilization engenders investor confidence in a country's fiscal resilience, insulates economies from external shocks, and ensures national ownership of development pathways. This was a core tenet of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and we support its reaffirmation in the Compromiso de Sevilla. Singapore sees three pillars that require our commitment. First, a well-designed and administered tax regime is fundamental. We must promote progressivity in tax systems, widen tax bases, and leverage digital transformation to enhance domestic resource mobilization. Singapore mandates e-filing for corporations and has simplified reporting measures for small businesses. Singapore also leverages data analytics to detect fraud and maximize compliance. This efficiency translates directly into revenue for public investment. Second, countries need to find ways to channel local savings into local development, and that requires dynamic capital markets. Singapore has built its bond market to do so. In addition, a robust, well-regulated banking sector is essential for intermediating savings, particularly for MSME financing. The issuance of Singapore government securities has created a trusted benchmark and made it safer and cheaper for companies to raise funds locally through their own bonds. Innovation is the next step. Singapore's Project Guardian initiative, for example, explores tokenization of bonds and other assets, making investments accessible to more people. Third, trust must be the bedrock of our financial systems. Illicit financial flows drain global resources. Hence, Singapore enforces a rigorous, risk-based anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing strategy, sharpening our focus on beneficial ownership transparency and leveraging technology for smarter supervision. Distinguished delegates, domestic resource mobilization is nation building in action. It funds schools and hospitals that empower citizens and drives inclusive economic growth, including through national job creation and MSME growth. It also requires international support, given the diverse and particular challenges of developing countries. Let us empower every country to strengthen this foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now I give a floor to His Excellency Shahriar Kader Siddiqui, Secretary, Economic Relations Division, Ministry of Finance, Bangladesh.
Thank you, Excellency, Co-Chair, and also panelists and distinguished discussants. Bangladesh aligns itself with the strategies to go for increasing domestic resource mobilization. In Bangladesh, we are advancing with digital revenue collection, modernizing public financial management, and aligning fiscal planning with our development priorities. We would like to welcome the renewed momentum reflected in the Compromiso de Sevilla toward UN Convention on Tax Cooperation, where we also would like to support the multilateralism for efficient tax system development. For us, in the global current scenario of diminishing international support, domestic resource mobilization is more than a technical exercise. However, from the discussion, it is evident that we have to increase at least 50% domestic resources. But how? Here, we would like to support the importance to plan together to go for action with a global architecture that is agreed structural solution which will focus on fair and transparent system of resource mobilization. Recognizing the structural weakness in the fiscal system in Bangladesh, we have taken long-term, medium-term, and other policies where whole-of-government approach to domestic resource mobilization with aims to increase the country's tax-to-GDP ratio and ensure end-to-end automation of tax collection processes going on. We would like to appreciate that the FFD4 outcome acknowledges challenges and commits to strengthening international cooperation in this regard. As the global shift is taking us more on trade, we need effective policy for trade facilitation with a specific focus on diversifying revenue sources of local governments. At the same time, we also look to put more emphasis on youth development for creating more job openings. We are fully committed to ensure that the global commitment translated into real and timely outcomes. We also look forward to work together with our development partners for mobilizing resources in a just, full manner. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I give the floor to Permanent Representative of Iraq on behalf of a group of 77 and China. Please.
I thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, for convening and leading this valuable panel discussion. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. The effective mobilization and use of domestic public resources remains cornerstone of sustainable development financing. As clearly acknowledged in the Sevilla commitments, public resources and fiscal policy are central to our collective response to the challenge of transformational investment. The Group 77 and China welcomes the constructive and balanced approach reflected in the sections on domestic resources mobilization. It sets out a forward-looking vision that recognizes the progress made by many developing countries in increasing tax revenues and strengthening public financial management. At the same time, the document reaffirms a fundamental principle for our group. International tax system must evolve to better reflect the priorities and the realities of developing countries, particularly LDCs, LLDCs, SIDS, African countries, and middle-income countries. The Group 77 and China firmly believes that effective domestic resources mobilization is best achieved when national leadership is matched by international solidarity, capacity building, and knowledge sharing. We appreciate the concrete deliverables set out in the Sevilla commitments, including support for digitalization of tax administrations, strength efforts to combat illicit financial flows, to promote nationally anchored fiscal and social compact, and the recognition of the Catholic role of public development banks, including substantial institutions, in advancing transformative investment. We reaffirm that national sovereignty must be fully respected. Each country has the sovereign right to determine its own national priorities, fiscal strategies, and policy choices in accordance with its development stage, capacities, and circumstances. To conclude, the G77 and China reiterates our commitment to advancing sustainable fiscal reforms rooted in national consensus and responsive to local needs. However, we stress that these efforts must be supported by an enabling international environment grounded in fiscal justice, solidarity, and effective cooperation. I thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Ndaba Nkosinathi Kaolate, Vice President of the Republic of Botswana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to represent Botswana and join leaders from across the world at this defining moment. We gather not merely to debate the mechanics of public financing, but to answer an urgent call, a call to reimagine sovereignty, to build trust, and to chart a new path towards shared and sustainable prosperity. For Botswana, domestic public resources are not just a revenue stream, they are the embodiment of national ownership, of dignity and resilience. This moment demands nothing less than bold, transformative action. In Botswana, we are answering this call. We are executing a comprehensive tax reform agenda, not as a bureaucratic obligation, but as a strategic investment in our people's future. Within weeks, we will present 3 landmark bills to Parliament to unify, streamline, broaden, and align with modern digitalized economy. These are not just legal updates, but declarations of intent to create a tax system that is equitable, credible, and fit for a 21st century economy. Botswana's forthcoming National Development Plan sets forth priorities that are both nationally grounded and globally relevant, including in green infrastructure, innovation, and human capital. These are precisely the investments that accelerate progress toward the SDGs and that offer high returns for forward-looking partners. So today we extend an invitation, not for charity, but for principled partnership, not for patronage, but for mutual prosperity. We seek investment that empowers and collaboration that respects sovereignty. And as African nations, let us move in concert, not only to reform at home, but to speak in one voice in shaping a global financial architecture that has too long ignored our realities. So in closing, let us remember that domestic resource mobilization is not a technical matter. It is a moral imperative. It is about choosing agency over dependency, justice over inertia, and future built with our hands, not one-handed down. Botswana stands ready, bold in ambition, clear in purpose, and unwavering in partnership. I thank you.
Thank you. We will now give the floor to Mr. Martin Tabi, Director-General Global Affairs, Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair.
Domestic public resources are the central starting point of sustainable development, or as Mr. Clark said this morning, the bedrock. It is how countries deliver for their people, how they build sovereignty and resilience. This is about stability, trust, and the social contract between governments and citizens. Canada is committed to supporting developing countries as they strengthen their tax systems and build more inclusive economies. Because when countries can raise and manage their own resources, development becomes more sustainable, more equitable, and more enduring. That's why Canada focuses its efforts on, among other things, promoting progressive tax systems that reduce inequality, building local capacity in digital systems and data management, and working to strengthen transparencies and accountability to combat illicit financing flows. Tax administration is a lever to transform societies and economies. By embracing digital tools, we can take advantage of new ways to streamline compliance, boost revenues, and fight corruptions. That's why Canada supports initiatives like Tax Inspectors Without Borders, connecting tax experts to solve real-world challenges. Looking ahead, ongoing negotiation on UN Tax Convention and the G20 OECD Inclusive Framework represent important milestones. These efforts show the power and necessity of multilateralism. They are also the reason why in Sevilla we are announcing new support for the UNDP's Integrated National Financing Framework and the OECD Center for Tax Policy and Administration to help developing countries implement key standards and digital systems. Because in a landscape where limited resources are stretched across many competing priorities, multilateralism remains our best path forward to build a more effective international system. We also help experts share best practices on tax governance, including around the natural resources revenue, which are increasingly critical. As the world accelerates the energy transition, resource-rich countries face both immense opportunity and risk. It is imperative that we continue to push for resources to be managed transparently, accountably, and for long-term without sacrificing the needs of future generations. Canada is ready to work alongside all partners gathered here today. We look forward to our work together to strengthen domestic resource mobilization and unlock a more just, sustainable, and self-reliant future. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the European Network on Debt and Development Civil Society FFD Mechanism. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Co-Chair. As the Civil Society Financing for Development Mechanism, we have a lot to say on tax. The UN Tax Convention is extremely dear to us. And yet today, there's something else I have to say. Mr. Co-Chair, I have been following the financing for development process for over a decade, and I have followed other UN processes for over 2 decades. And I have never seen such restrictive rules for civil society participation, nor such impossible working conditions. Mr. Co-Chair, we have an outcome document that speaks about transparency, inclusivity, and accountability. We have an outcome document that was agreed behind closed doors in a basement in New York where civil society was not welcome. And maybe that's one reason why we have an outcome document that falls far short on the solutions that we need. In the civil society group, we are very global, we are very diverse, we have experts, we have community representatives, we have women's groups, we have colleagues coming from all over the world to attend these meetings. They come directly from the front line of economic inequalities, and they bring concrete proposals for solutions that they would like to share with governments. And it's not an easy job to be civil society. We have to develop joint positions. We have to comment on highly technical issues. And we're also expected to be sharp, to be fair, and even to be funny. In other UN meetings, you will see civil society campaigning and dancing and sometimes even singing in the corridors to get our message across. It is our job to bring life, color, democracy, and legitimacy to this process. And yet here, we are not allowed to wear a T-shirt with a campaign message on, let alone any of the other things that I just mentioned. We even have restrictions on our rights to assemble. And this is happening in Europe, where we claim to show leadership on democracy. We are not seeing any of that leadership. And even here today, I don't know if we are not multi enough or if we are not stakeholders enough. But there was clearly no space for us on the official speakers list. Mr. Chair, the Charter of the United Nations does not say we, the member states. The Charter of the United States, the Charter of the United Nations starts with we, the people. And we, the people, we are here to do our job, and we are asking for full, effective, and meaningful participation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Ms. Karen De Brouwer, Director of Financing for Development, Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. The mobilization of national public resources is much more than a technical core. It is the cornerstone of a renewed social contract. At this fourth conference, which marks a milestone in the global development agenda, Mexico advocates for strengthening state capacity, progressive revenue collection, spending equitably, and investing in sustainability and collective well-being with strategic vision. Without sound public finances, inclusive development would simply not be possible. We are pleased that the outcome document recognizes that domestic mobilization is the foundation of financing for development and reaffirms commitments to enhance progressive taxation, efficient spending, and budgetary alignment with the 2030 agenda. We also appreciate your call to strengthen international tax cooperation and accountability as the pillars that underpin democratic legitimacy. Mexico has shown that it is possible to expand fiscal space without compromising stability. From January to April 2025, we achieved record revenue collection with real growth of 9.9%. This achievement reflects progress in digitalization, smart taxation, and the fight against evasion, which has made it possible to sustain social policies and infrastructure without resorting to excessive debt. But mobilizing more is not enough. We must mobilize better. Since 2018, Mexico has earmarked its budget according to the SDGs and deployed a sustainable financing strategy with 97 measures. Our sustainable tax system classifies 124 priority economic activities, and our sustainable public procurement, which represents up to 20% of our budget, acts as a lever for regional development, strengthening of MSCs and social inclusion. Development banks play a crucial role. They not only provide loans for the energy transition, transport or utilities, but they also drive social infrastructure in areas lagging furthest behind, reducing territorial gaps and supporting subnational governments with limited capacity through technical assistance. We promote multi-year planning systems that allow strategic investments to be prioritized based on impact and sustainability. These efforts reflect our conviction that transformation begins at the local level with a view to going global. We strongly support the UN Tax Cooperation Framework Convention to strengthen fiscal capacity, promote more competition, and ensure that large corporations are taxed where they generate value. Excellencies, Mexico contributes with real action to what Sevilla calls for in marking the norm. public finances as a tool to reduce inequalities, promote territorial cohesion, and accelerate fulfillment of the SDGs. I thank you.
Thank you. I will now give the floor to Mr. Godwin Kwaba, Deputy Permanent Representative, Uganda.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, Uganda commends the ongoing efforts to support developing countries to enhance domestic resource mobilization, including broadening tax bases, integrating the informal sector into the formal sector, boosting institutional capacity to effectively develop and implement tax policy, tax administrations, as well as overall public. We further commend the ongoing efforts to enhance international cooperation by promoting engagements to strengthen the international tax system through an inclusive dialogue which ensures participation of developing countries. The United Nations and other global institutions will need to enhance the technical assistance provided to developing countries in terms of training and mentorship to officials involved in tax policy and administration in developing countries to enhance their revenue mobilization efforts. For countries to benefit from natural resources, there is need for a coordinated framework for tracking and sharing information, the origin and destination of exports of natural resources to eliminate illicit transactions that promote corruption, undermine fiscal frameworks, and in the process enhance domestic revenue to finance development. As regards effective implementation and enforcement of multilateral frameworks to assist state parties to combat illicit financial flows, developing countries, including Africa, should be given an opportunity to participate in developing and implementing mechanisms to track illicit transactions in all its forms, to ensure that low-income developing countries optimally benefit from value created in their jurisdictions. We support, as Uganda, the proposal for timely trade data exchange to address smuggling of commercial goods and trade misinvoicing using appropriate technologies. I thank you, Chair.
I thank you. I will now give the floor to His Excellency Paulo Rangel, Minister of State and Foreign Affairs, Portugal.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is naturally a pleasure to participate in this roundtable, and I would like to be very short and convey three essential messages. First message: domestic public resources are the backbone of sustainable development. They are the most stable source for financing sustainable development and key to reducing dependence on external flows, such as loans, while strengthening autonomy in policy making. Resilient financial systems are essential to invest in key development priorities and protect the most vulnerable. Debt management, tax reform, and budget efficiency are not just technical issues. They are strategic instruments to expand fiscal space, strengthen institutions, and enable countries to shape their own future. Second message: what is Portugal doing? Through bilateral and triangular cooperation, in particular in Portuguese-speaking countries, we are supporting our partners to collect more and spend better. How? Investing in robust and tailor-made capacity-building programs to improve 1. Strategic debt management, 2. Public sector governance, and 3. Customs modernization. We help strengthen budget frameworks, improve public enterprise oversight, and modernize financial systems for greater transparency and efficiency. We also support more effective revenue systems, not only to ensure debt sustainability, but to empower countries to finance their priorities on their own terms. Against this background, Portugal supports the OECD's two-pillar solution for international tax reform and a UN framework convention on international tax cooperation, and combats illicit financial flows which undermine fiscal fairness and erode public trust. Third and final message, we need to look ahead. Technical cooperation should be at the forefront of our priorities. We must step up our efforts and use official development assistance more strategically to this end. It is not just about sharing tools or best practices. It is about building the foundations for real sovereignty and sustainable growth. The Seville commitment offers a clear roadmap: stronger cooperation, stronger ownership, stronger institutions. Portugal will deliver on the Seville commitment and will continue to do its part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I will now give the floor to His Excellency Vagiz Kismatulin, Director-General of the Ministry of National Economy, Kazakhstan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to welcome all participants. Kazakhstan fully recognizes the critical importance of domestic resources in achieving the sustainable development goals. The mobilization and alignment of domestic public resources lies at the very heart of sustainable development, and here I'm pleased to share Kazakhstan's experience in this area. We recognize that achieving the sustainable development goals is impossible without stable and sufficient financial resources. And Kazakhstan Sustainable Goals Financing Framework includes the state budget, off-budget funds, the National Oil Fund, and resources of the quasi-public sector and national holdings as well. All of these sources play a vital role in financing sustainable development. Today, over 80% of the state budget in Kazakhstan is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. About 50% of public spending goes to the social sector, including social security, education, healthcare, culture, and sports. In order to finance parts of these expenditures, we attract transfers from the National Oil Fund following strict fiscal rules. At the same time, we are actively working with international financial institutions to bring in additional funding to support sustainable economic development. Kazakhstan has been implementing institutional reforms on a continuous basis to strengthen domestic public resources and enhance the sustainability of public finances. We are currently undertaking major fiscal and tax reforms. This year, we adopted a new budget code to enhance flexibility, efficiency, and transparency in public finance management. Just last week, our parliament passed a new tax code which aims to increase fiscal revenues while reducing administrative burdens and advancing digitalization in tax administration. The mobilization of domestic resources would not be possible without active private sector engagement. We consider We consider private partnership as an effective tool for delivering infrastructure as social projects. In conclusion, I would like to reaffirm that Kazakhstan is fully committed to the principles of sustainable development, financing through the mobilization and alignment of domestic public resources. Thank you.
I thank you. I will now give the floor to the United Nations Population Fund. You have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, investments in people are the bedrock for sustainable growth. In the face of intersecting global crises and demographic shifts, we must prioritize financing that is inclusive, equitable, and future-facing. As we talk about domestic resource mobilization, it is important to align domestic resources with long-term development outcomes, which means investing where the returns are transformational, particularly in human capital, gender equality, and the well-being of future generations, central pillars of resilient economies and healthy societies. Population dynamics, including changes in age structure, fertility, and life expectancy, are reshaping the development landscape. Whether countries are facing rapid population growth, youth bulges, or aging, these shifts have profound implications for public finance, service delivery, and economic planning. Investing in sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equality is one of the most intelligent decisions governments can make to promote sustainable development. It is an investment in human capital that financially benefits governments, saves on health spending, expands fiscal space, and boosts labor productivity. This in turn promotes investment, reduces inequality, improves quality of life, and fulfills human rights. Every dollar invested in maternal health and family planning yields an average of 8.40 in economic benefits, dollars. Over long time frames, every dollar invested in sexual and reproductive health can yield returns of up to 120 US dollars. Capturing the gender bonus and leveraging the demographic dividend are among the most efficient and sustainable ways to reduce poverty. Investing in preventing teenage pregnancy offers a significant return, up to $45 for every dollar investment. UNFPA is working with governments to develop evidence on the returns of investments to reduce unmet need for family planning, prevent maternal deaths, and combat harmful gender practices. We have developed more than 100 investment cases with government and partners, and they are ready to be implemented. Let us make that choice boldly and together. Let's make the Compromiso de Sevilla really, truly work for women and girls. Thank you.
I thank you. I will now give the floor to Donalyn Minimo, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Finance, Philippines. You have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The Philippines welcomes the adoption of the Compromiso de Sevilla and commends efforts in advancing an agenda to strengthen fiscal systems, promote inclusive growth, and the Sustainable Development Goals. We strongly support scaling up tailored, demand-driven capacity-building programs, particularly in tax administration, digitalization, and public financial management. As the Compromiso rightly states, domestic resource mobilization must be complemented by effective international cooperation, grounded in respect for national sovereignty and policy space. We also affirm the importance of inclusive and effective international tax cooperation, recognizing that measures to curb tax evasion, illicit financial flows, and corruption must go hand in hand with capacity development, especially in countries with limited fiscal space. The Philippines notes that while the outcome document provides strategic direction, further clarity on actionable measures is essential, particularly those that address the practical needs of developing countries on the ground. Many developing countries, including the Philippines, have made significant progress in strengthening technical capacity, institutional frameworks, and reform readiness to advance fiscal modernization. However, to sustain and accelerate these reforms, it is imperative that developing countries receive targeted and timely support in, first, enhancing information and technology infrastructure, second, improving revenue data and statistical systems, third, building human capital through technical training and knowledge exchange, and fourth, promoting open source digital solutions to streamline tax administration and support the integration of the informal sector. In this context, we welcome the commitment to double support for the domestic resource mobilization by 2030 and call on development partners to ensure that such support is predictable, transparent, and accessible, particularly for countries seeking to raise their tax to GDP ratios to at least 15%. Furthermore, we welcome commitments to enhance beneficial ownership, transparency, strengthen public registries, and promote cooperation in information exchange, all of which contribute to a more transparent and equitable global tax environment. The Philippines remains committed to strengthening our fiscal systems through progressive and efficient taxation, transparent spending, and inclusive economic policies. We are ready to share experiences in tax reform, digitalization, and public finance transparency. But as we move forward from FFD4, we emphasize the need to translate principles into practical partnerships, ensuring that every country, regardless of income level, has access to the tools and resources necessary to mobilize domestic revenue and deliver on the SDGs. Thank you.
I thank you. I will now give the floor to His Excellency Gordon Radman, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Foreign and European Affairs, Croatia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, dear colleagues. It's a great honor to address you today as we gather at a time when the need to strengthen domestic resource mobilization is more urgent than ever. We are faced with mounting global challenges, from climate change to economic volatility, from demographic shifts to geopolitical tensions. Our collective capacity to meet the sustainable development goals depends on how effectively we mobilize and align our domestic public resources. Before becoming a member state of the European Union 12 years ago, Croatia has undergone profound political and economic transformation. That is why we understand very well the importance of sound fiscal policy, institutional reform, and strategic investment in long-term development. Our own experience has taught us that the sustainable management of domestic resources begins with trust. Trust in institutions, transparency in governance, and inclusive decision-making. Domestic resource mobilization is not only a matter of revenue collection, it is a commitment to equity, social cohesion, and resilience. This requires stronger tax systems, more efficient public spending, and determined action against corruption and illicit financial flows. It also requires partnership across all sectors, public and private, local and international. Croatia supports international cooperation on tax transparency and advocates for aligning public investment with climate and development goals. As one of Europe's fastest growing economies, Croatia ranks 8 out of 167 countries in Sustainable Development Goals performance, a testament to our commitment to sustainable development. Through our development cooperation, we are devoted to sharing experience and supporting capacity building in partner countries, especially in our closest neighborhood and beyond. At the same time, Croatia is decisively responding to urgent needs in areas such as global health. Last week, Croatian Prime Minister Andrej Plenković has announced that Croatia will contribute 6 million euros to Gavi, the vaccine alliance, in the period 2025-2030. This donation will help Gavi to continue delivering life-saving vaccines to millions of children worldwide. Let me be clear, development financing financing is not merely about quantity, it's about quality. It's about aligning domestic budgets with national priorities and ensuring that every euro or dollar spent delivers the maximum impact on the ground. In closing, I wish to reaffirm Croatia's commitment to the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the principles of effective, inclusive and transparent financing for development. Together, through dialogue, innovation and solidarity, we can turn public resources into powerful instruments for a more just, green and prosperous future for all. Thank you.
I thank you. Now I will give the floor to the International Union for Conservation of Nature. You have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, notes that our economies and societies fundamentally depend on nature. However, a significant financing gap, some 700 billion a year, remains to fully implement the CBD Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Closing the financing gap requires mobilizing resources from all sources, including public and private, and international and domestic resources. Existing commitment to increasing international biodiversity financing to 30 billion a year is positive, but it also highlights that the majority of resource mobilization for biodiversity must be domestic. We therefore welcome the Sevilla commitment's call for doubling support for domestic resource mobilization for developing countries. A key priority moving forward for countries is to adopt a whole-of-economy approach to integrating biodiversity into all economic sectors. This requires realigning economic activities to reduce and remove harm, amplify positive impacts, and ultimately restore biodiversity. Public sector must also support private sector in sharing responsibility and contributing to biodiversity. To help achieve these objectives, IUCN supports countries in formulating national biodiversity finance plans, mainstreaming biodiversity. IUCN also supports both public and private sectors to integrate nature into economic measurement and accounting. IUCN calls for all countries to step up the efforts to repurpose subsidies harmful to biodiversity, in line with their existing commitments under the UN framework. Similar agreements to the WTO agreement on fisheries subsidies should take place in agriculture, forestry, and other relevant sectors. To ensure that financing delivers conservation effectively, IUCN encourages the use of scientifically robust standards, tools, and metrics as performance indicators, such as those developed by IUCN partners. Economic realignment and investment in nature not only supports biodiversity, but it also advances several other sustainable development goals, including those on climate action, food security, clean water, good health, economic growth, and decent work, thereby helping countries reach multiple targets cost-effectively. IUCN's quadrennial World Conservation Congress will be held this October in Abu Dhabi. We warmly invite you to the Congress for continued discussions about these topics, including the importance of nature to economies, livelihoods, and human well-being. Thank you.
I thank you. I will now give the floor to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. A new surge of public investment in social infrastructure is essential for human capital development, innovation, and inclusive economic growth. However, these sectors remain critically underfunded, particularly in developing countries. UNESCO's science report shows that 80% of countries invest less than 1% of GDP in research and development, while new data from the Global Education Monitoring Report recently warns that global aid to education could drop by 25% in the coming 3 years. Bridging these gaps requires a fundamental shift in mindset and urgent action. The first step is recognizing the high returns of investing in people and societies. Every dollar invested in education generates 10 to 50 US dollars in economic growth through higher earnings, better health, and stronger institutions. But the cost of inaction is steep. 1.1 trillion is lost annually from early school leaving and 3.3 trillion from children lacking basic skills. Debt burners are further squeezing public budgets. Our latest analysis finds that in 113 countries, home to 6 billion people, debt servicing now exceeds public education spending. In response, UNESCO will present guidelines and roadmaps for debt swapped for education here tomorrow as a concrete contribution to the Sevilla platform. The Compromiso de Sevilla marks a turning point by affirming that education must be financed adequately to ensure quality education for all and to drive innovation as well as digital and financial inclusion. It also recognized for the first time the vital role of culture in sustainable development. Culture and creative sector contribute 3% of global GDP and support nearly 50 million jobs. UNESCO calls on member states to work with private and international partners to fully integrate education, science and culture into sustainable development financing.
Thank you. I will now give the floor to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, thank you for giving UNHCR the opportunity to take the floor and to share some of our observations on the perspectives of refugees and the countries that host them. Protracted displacement is on the rise, driven by complex crisis. Our most recent statistics, just issued on the past World Refugee Day, 20th of June, estimate that by the end of 2024, 123.2 million people worldwide are forcibly displaced, 31 million of which are refugees under UNHCR's mandate. That is 1 in 67 people worldwide who remain forcibly displaced, these numbers doubling in number over the last decade. Despite the profound efforts of host countries, resources to respond adequately to displacement crises are not keeping pace. The resource gap underscores the urgency for more impactful spending that can protect lives. And the evidence is clear. Hosting refugees is a significant responsibility, but it need not be a burden, especially if the right policies are in place. Well-integrated refugees can make a significant contribution to economic growth and help broaden the tax base, having a positive net fiscal impact. To cite just 2 recent evidence-based reports to this effect, one from Deloitte and UNHCR in Poland, showing that Ukrainian refugees' net impact on the economy when allowed to work has been a net increase of 2.7% of GDP. Also on the cost side, a recent World Bank UNHCR report highlights that savings to international assistance, where refugees themselves contribute to the local economy, could generate as much as 16 billion in savings a year that could then be redirected to host communities. UNHCR has a number of key strategic partnerships with key development entities. The World Bank through the IDA window, which has generated some 5 billion in IDA grants and concessional loans for the benefit of refugees and hosting communities, and our collaboration with the International Monetary Fund, particularly on data and evidence, to inform solid national policy on the integration of refugees. To wrap up quickly, inclusive policies that allow displaced populations to make a contribution to the communities that host them help save money. Support to host communities is essential. Not only can we direct funds towards the refugees, but it must go to those who host them. And last but not least, continued international support is necessary to support those states that so generously keep their borders open to offer sanctuary to those forced to flee. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. I will now give the floor to the Global Alliance for Tax Justice and Society for International Development. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, for the opportunity. I speak on behalf of the Global Alliance for Tax Justice and CSO FFD mechanism. We gather here at a critical time in history when the world is in deep multiple crises so profound that some may soon be irreversible if we do not pursue fundamental change without delay. Inequality within and between countries is widening, environmental destruction and climate collapse are accelerating, indebted countries are being milked dry just to keep vulture creditors afloat. Tax dodging is draining public coffers, making the poor poorer, while billionaires are soon to multiply into trillionaires. And yet, in the face of all this, the Compromiso de Sevilla offers us nothing compelling and promising. Some may have misunderstood Compromiso de Sevilla as the Sevilla Compromise. And while that may not be the correct linguistic translation, it is not entirely wrong politically. Because what this document offers is not a bold commitment, it is a commitment to compromise. A compromise with inequality, with financial injustice, with ecological collapse. A compromise with the very systems that have brought us to this breaking point. In balance, the Compromiso de Sevilla is exactly what the name unintentionally implies. A compromise with those who profit from crisis while silencing the voice of the most affected and those who resist. The FFD4 outcome document does not meet the level of ambition required to respond to the crisis we are facing, crises that are interconnected, urgent, and structural. It seeks compromise where determination is needed. It offers rhetorical tweaks where radical transformation is urgent. In compromising at the least common denominator level, it plays into the hands of the status quo. That is why we, as civil society and social movements, are extremely disappointed by the outcome document. Disappointed because we were hopeful that the FFD4 will rise to its historical responsibilities. Disappointed because we are proponents and champions of transparent and inclusive intergovernmental process at the UN to lead governance and structural reforms to address challenges affecting the whole world. Disappointment because a hopeful process has settled for marginal crisis management propositions. FFD4 has been compromised. We will continue to fight for uncompromised and uncompromising FFD process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the moderator for a final wrap-up.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair, Vice President of Sierra Leone. Let me take this opportunity to thank you, Co-Chair, to thank the panelists, the discussant with this, and all of you that have taken the floor, not only for this rich exchange that we have, but also for the time management. Clearly, ODA is the whole landscape, ODA landscape
is significantly shifting. We have heard you at once that mobilizing domestic public resources takes on special significance, and that multilateral action remains crucial and must be renewed. You have also emphasized that mobilizing domestic public resources crucially include but extend beyond raising resources. It is inseparable from how we govern. That is how we foster equitable and inclusive social cohesion, inclusive societies. We also heard a call to be intentional by aligning spending with social priorities, including through decent jobs for our people, for our societies. Domestic resource mobilization requires international solidarity, fostering international tax coordination, and addressing trans-border tax avoidance, providing technical cooperation, and building a global architecture of timely multilateral support. So I really want to echo this poignant statement about agency and the interdependency, about sovereignty and renewed multilateral growth. Finally, we also heard that domestic reforms must be backed by international action. We need to build on experiences like those shared during your intervention. We need to strengthen tax cooperation frameworks and ensure that those most affected are represented and are heard in this process. We need visionary, creative initiatives that are responsive to national, regional peculiarities across the whole development divide. The Compromiso de Sevilla provides us with both political consensus and the benchmark. You have called for implementation, which requires coordinated action, resolute follow-up through at national as well as multilateral levels. So I really want to once again thank all of you and now pass the floor back to the co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and Excellencies and distinguished delegates. Let me thank the co-chair, moderator, panelists, and all participants for these discussions that offered interesting challenges and solutions. And by sharing best practices, we can move towards building more resilient, inclusive, and forward-looking societies. So thank you very much from my side.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, before concluding this roundtable, I want to take the opportunity by thanking my co-chair, His Excellency, the President of Estonia, Al-Alkaris, for his effort to steer the discussions, and more importantly, for his insightful remarks. We've had particularly experience from his country on how digitalization can support domestic resource mobilization. Distinguished delegate excellencies, I would also like to take the opportunity to thank all the participants for their forward-looking and result-oriented interventions and for their cooperation and goodwill, and more importantly for the commitment we have made here today. I want to personally thank you on behalf of my co-chair for keeping to time that we have finished exactly 15 minutes before the scheduled time. Distinguished delegates, kindly note that the summary of our deliberations in this roundtable will be presented to the closing plenary meeting of the conference in the afternoon of Thursday, 3rd July, and it will be included in the final report of the conference. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, on that positive note, we have thus concluded this multi-stakeholder roundtable. The meeting is adjourned, and I thank you very well. Finish.